supremacy. And with this particular video, I want to talk about the metaphysics of XXX death ascending into higher parallel dimensions. Now, this is very interesting. I want to break down a video that he did called Sad, that was released the day he died, where he attended his own funeral and came to terms with himself. It's like his self was the Grim Reaper. His self was the enemy. But he had to defeat that self. And within that self was the illusion of death. So he had to confront his illusion of death by attending his own funeral and defeating himself. Now, if you see him laying in the casket, he was dressed like somebody in the Matrix. Very interesting. Or in the movie One with Jet Li. But it had a Matrix vibe to it. So his artificial self, his self that is temporary, that is a part of this artificial construct and artificial reality, he was at war with that dimension of himself, and he had to go beyond that, because the illusion of his death lied within that conflict. So when he defeated his artificial self that was supposed to be dead, that represented or reflected death, let's put it that way, that was symbolic of death, he really transcended into eternal life. Out of our attachments to this material world comes our fear of death. But what's tied into our attachment to the artificial world is our belief in an artificial self that's generated by this world. And even that self is filled with limitations that exist within boundaries that this simulated program allows to exist. And I'll go in on that. So once XXX in the video said, he began to basically defeat himself. That means go beyond the illusion that was presented by his artificial self. He was able to go beyond that and defeat that. Then he tapped into supernatural powers. He basically became a supernatural being. And that's when the shift happens and he ascends into a parallel universe. What we saw X doing was, in the video, was now he was moving things with his mind, because he started to discover the powers of his own mind. That's when you begin to unplug from the simulated reality, the artificial reality, when you start seeing the powers of your own mind and of your own consciousness. Now you're transcending the limits of the artificial self, which is limited, which can die, which has boundaries. Once you start transcending that, you become in touch with your unlimited and eternal self. Then you can dimension hop. Then you can go in and out of different dimensions, different galaxies, different states of consciousness, different dimensions. Once you start realizing that you're beyond the artificial self. So in the video, he symbolically defeated the artificial self that really was dead to begin with. He was laying in the coffin, so he was already dead. But he had to defeat death itself. So basically he had to kill him. He had to kill himself, or kill that which was inside of him that was representative of death, which is created in the artificial reality. It's created in the artificial realm. He had to kill himself. And when he killed himself, he killed death. Because the self he killed was the artificial self, which believes in death, which believes in duality, which is trying to survive, which is a survivalistic idea. It has to survive. Your true self does not have to survive. It's eternal. It's beyond survival. So the part of you that fears death is part of a artificial program that's trying to survive. It's a parasitic idea or concept. So he defeated that. He killed himself. He killed his artificial reality, his artificial self, which is where all the fears, which is all your fears are at. All your fears live within your artificial construct of you that you must maintain. You must keep that going. It makes you reactionary. It makes you fearful. It makes you selfish. It makes you try to over-present yourself in a simulated world. I'm going in on this. So he had to kill his goddamn self to go beyond all his fears. And once he did that, once not only did he kill himself, he killed death himself. He killed the illusion of death. He wrestled with death. He wrestled with the Grim Reaper, which was himself. Once he annihilated that, he ascended. Not only did he ascend spiritually, he also ascended materially. I'm going in on that. Now, there's two levels of matrix. One is the matrix of man. That's man's artificial reality that's created by technology, consumerism, capitalism, corporations, where they program human consciousness with this idea of who you are that they market to you and keep you trapped within their grid in order to sustain this false sense of self. That's the matrix. That's one degree of the matrix. And there's certain beings that capitalize off you being trapped within that matrix, off you being plugged in. That's how they thrive and survive and eat and live, off you being plugged up, because they use your energy to run their entire matrix, which allows them to feed off of billions of people. So that is the artificial matrix. That is the matrix that has been designed by man. Man with the help of some higher intelligent parasitic beings. But that's a different video. But that's one level of matrix. Dealing with the corporations, dealing with the grids, dealing with the program that they give you to limit you to only be able to exist within they false construct. And by believing that's the only place you exist, you help sustain their reality under the auspices of trying to sustain the false you that they created. But now, what about there's a matrix of consciousness. The matrix of soul consciousness. Let me go in on that. That's a matrix where the small matrix that I'm telling you about exists within it. Man-made matrix exists within the matrix of soul consciousness. It's inside of it. It fits into the greater matrix of soul consciousness. Now, the matrix of soul consciousness is that your life, or what you're calling life, is a simulated program where the soul plays out its own contemplation, its own evolution, its own development. It plays it out through this simulated reality. But it's the super soul, because it's not just a soul. It's almost like consciousness itself. It creates this artificial reality of them, those, and they. Where that small matrix that I was telling you about exists, the micro matrix, soul consciousness is the macro matrix. Where what you're calling life is a simulated reality for you to play out certain ideas, certain concepts, certain ways that you need to evolve your consciousness as a creative entity. So everybody is an actor in that movie, and every event is the stage of that play where the self is working out its own process into realizing the totality of what it is. So this is all simulated in the sense that there are no enemies, there's no one outside of you. It's all you expressing something to yourself through all the events, circumstances, situations, and people that enter in your life. You're teaching yourself something. You're expressing something to yourself. You're articulating something from yourself in an outward expression. And life is that simulation of that. It's where it plays out at. So in a lot of cases, that which you have to teach, that which you would like to teach, that which you're trying to teach, is that which you yourself want to learn. It's what your soul needs to learn and need to understand and overstand what you're trying to teach. You're trying to convince yourself under the auspices of other people in this simulated program that we're calling human life. So while you have a message for everybody, it's something that you're trying to teach and tell everybody, you're really trying to plant that message in the seat of your own soul consciousness. But you're using this simulated reality as a way to embed this within yourself, to really digest this yourself, to absorb this. So in your form of outward expression, you're really inwardly absorbing through going through this simulated program that we're calling life. Follow me, because I don't want to go over people's heads with this. So you will use this life to express the highest thing that you need to learn and realize. And at the moment that you learn and realize it, will be the moment that you ascend from this particular dimension to another. And how you ascend and how you leave this particular dimension will be the epic moment that will make the grand statement of the lesson that you were trying to teach, that you were really trying to learn simultaneously, and trying to express the fulfillment of that particular idea. Let me tie that into XXX. Look at how XXX died. He came here to this particular plane as somewhat as of a violent soul. There was a lot of violence there. There was a lot of materialism. There was a lot of that. Let's just look at it real. That was a desire for materialism, and there was a lot of validation being seeked out through materialism. Now what happened? Let's talk about what happened. He was murdered in a very violent way over materialism. So his death, because when we talk about violence, we know there was some domestic violence going on there. There was some violence. There was a very violent, some violence energy there. The soul had to realize non-violence. The soul had to realize love. This is what the soul XXX had to realize. but was simultaneously trying to express that to the world. And that even breaks down why people seem to contradict themselves. People contradict themselves because the lesson that they really are trying to teach is the one that they need to learn. So since they really haven't fully learned it and haven't really expressed it, is why it looks like they're contradicting the teaching or contradicting what they're saying. Because it's for them to learn. They came here to get it. They are a part of those who need to awaken to what they're here to share. And a lot of times they've just awoken up. They've awoken a lot further along than the people that they're supposed to share it with. But that doesn't mean they completely awoken to that particular idea. X is an example of it. But the point that he awakened to that idea is the point that it can be fully taught and distributed to the masses of consciousness here in this simulated reality simultaneously. At the point that it can really be taught, at the point that he really learned it, he will ascend to another dimension once he gets the lesson. Because this is nothing but a simulated reality where we're trying to tell ourselves something as an oversoul. We're using the human experience to communicate something to our soul. So at the point that he gets the lesson, he will transcend this plane. And how he transcend, the very method by way in which he died, spreaded the message that he himself needed to learn, that he needed to teach. So at the moment of his death was the crescendo. The lesson was in his death that he sought to teach, that was in his life, that he learned. We talk about karma, and I gotta go in on this. I gotta add this to this. And by no means did I want to make this video too long. But when you talk about karma, you're always talking about what's coming back to you based on something that you did. That you acted in this way, and this is going to come back to get you, and all this. But let's keep it real. There's nobody but you. What you're calling life is a simulated reality where you're trying to express something to your spiritual self in the realm of human consciousness. That's what life is. So there's no one to keep the score. There's no karma that's coming back to you. There is no system of laws, rules, and regulations that exists outside of what your soul is trying to communicate to you through your human experience. So there's no karma. There's no reincarnating into some weird-ass animal or weird creature. Whatever that you reincarnate or however you come back is your way of communicating with yourself like you do in a dream world. See, when you dream, you're even trying to tell yourself something, but you don't know what you're trying to tell yourself. That's why you got dream decoders and dream books, and you go out seeking out shamans and people to help you with these dreams, because you don't even know what you're trying to tell yourself. But the truth is, nobody outside of your dream can really tell you what's going on, because it's a message that you're trying to give yourself, and you keep coming back to give yourself a particular message. Every time you come back, and every dimension is reflective of you trying to give yourself a unique message. And the closer that you get to receiving the message, the more you become a teacher of the message. And the more you learn the message, that's when you begin to ascend to a dimension or to a plane higher. Once you have really become the message. In XXX's so-called death, he became the message so he could ascend to something else, to another plane, because he got it. And as he completely got it, everyone on this plane at least became aware of what the message was, even if they didn't get it. Once they get it, they'll ascend it. They'll ascend to another level because they're here to get a similar message. See, this is how the soul operates. So in a dream, you're having that dream to tell yourself something, to communicate something, to express something. And sometimes when you get it, that's when you wake up. When you get to the climax of the dream, that's when you wake up. That's how Earth is. Earth is another dream. It's another simulated reality of your consciousness playing out. You're playing out your divine consciousness. I hope y'all follow me with this. So we are supposed to learn or absorb or articulate or become what we're supposed to teach. But at the point of our becomingness, truly becomingness, that's when we will ascend this particular plane. It will be finished. And in that, the death is symbolic. See, people think they came here to gain something in this world. You came here to transcend this world and to transform this world through your own ascension as a soul. Period. But this is where it will play out. Everything you need to use to divinely express that lesson, that jewel, to express that supreme state, everything that you need to do that is here. Everything you need. This is your canvas. This is where all the paint is at. And you're here to express that, but the person who really needs to see the expression is you. Is you, and at the moment you get it, everything changes. There's a paradigm shift. And then you can move to another dimension. Once you have that paradigm shift, you're really shifting into another dimension where you're no longer in the same place because you are in a different consciousness. You're in a different stream of consciousness. Your own consciousness has taken on a completely different form. And now you're living in that form of your own consciousness. See, all this matrix shit that's going on, the micro matrix that I was telling you about, is actually meant to distract you from what your soul was here to express, what the divine presentation of the soul, let's call it that. The micro matrix is supposed to distract you, where parasitic entities that live on this plane that cannot ascend can suck your energy to create their own artificial experience of heaven here. They can suck off you to do that and distract you from your divine evolution as a soul to what you're supposed to realize, to actually architect and construct your own heaven and your own utopia as a consciousness being and as a consciousness entity. But you have to go through the steps and stages and levels and go through paradigm shifts. Now let me talk about death just for a little bit, because that's very deep. That, and this is going to blow some people's minds, that you're dying all the time and people around you are dying all the time. Let me hit you with this. And I don't want to confuse you, so I'll just deal with your death. I'll keep it in later videos. I'll go deeper with this. You think that every day that you wake up, that you're waking up in the same world because it looks familiar. It's like Groundhog's Day to you if y'all saw the movie. You think you're waking up in the same world, but you're not. In other planes and dimensions, you have died because you have ascended those planes. because you got those lessons. So you're waking up in as a new entity in a realm that seems like the old one that you existed in. Follow me with this. I know this sounds spooky, but you're actually waking up in a new realm that is created by your new consciousness. It's generated, self-generated by your new consciousness. It looks like the old realm. In the old realm, you died in your sleep. There's some realms right now that's talking about you and saying, you know what? Damn, they died in their sleep. I feel sorry for them. They died in their sleep. They didn't die in their sleep. They awoke in their sleep into another plane. And they just died in the dimension where you feel that they died at. Because you're still there. They didn't die, but they're existing in a parallel universe where the higher version of you is in that realm with them, that you haven't woke up in your dream to that version of yourself to be on that plane with them. I know that sounds heavy, but just follow me with that. That's why you got to follow. It's talking about I want to be a follower. You got to follow if you're going to wake up, because it's deep. So a lot of people that you think are dead are on another realm with the higher version of yourself living in a parallel universe where you have realized your own self on a higher level. But you're now trapped in a dream within a dream. See, you're trapped within your own simulated dream, trying to get a message to yourself that you're not getting because you're being distracted by parasitic entities that exist in that dream world that are capitalizing off of you to maintain their utopia within that dream world. So you're within a dream within a dream. What we call the matrix of white supremacy is a dream within a dream. So you can't get the message you're supposed to get that you're trying to give yourself in a dream because you're distracted by parasitic entities within that dream. Once you're no longer distracted, you get the message you're supposed to get within that dream, and then you wake up into another dimension of a higher version of your higher self on another plane. So you already exist simultaneously on millions of different planes. You just only awaken to yourself on one. And that's what you call your life right now. When you awaken to yourself on those other planes, you instantly go to those other planes. But there are billions of probabilities. And all of these probabilities are dimensions that all exist simultaneously. And in some of those probable existence, you've died there. You've died there. You have succumbed to your fear. And you've died on those particular planes. And some people have experienced your death and had your funeral until they wake up and realize that, wait a minute, and wake up to themselves as a higher vision, a higher version of themselves on another plane. They'll wake up there and realize you are alive somewhere else. So you've already died within the realm of infinite probability. You've already died in numerous amount of times. You've died in infinitum, in every possible way you could die. But you haven't awakened to experience that death, nor have you awakened in a way where you can experience your life as higher versions of yourself on different planes. Because on certain planes, you need to die on. See, I'll just put it this way. You got friends and family members out there that, or just friends that you went to school with, just friends from way back, that you don't even know if they're dead or alive. You've lost full contact with them, don't know how to contact with them, and you've even forgot that you've forgotten them. So they're dead in your consciousness. Why? Because they exist on different planes. You're in a different plane. So on the plane you're on, they're really dead. Until you awaken to a frequency or a vibration where you can re-attract them or re-experience them or reawaken to their existence. So that's how life and death is. It's that deep. It's all about consciousness, paradigm shifting, moving through different dimensions and awakening in different ways. Where you are at now is nothing but your self-consciousness. That's where you're at, and that's the plane that you're on. And when you become self-conscious in a different way, you'll be on a different plane with different powers and with different energies. We can see that. XXX, his video really broke it down. So he had to learn the lessons that he wanted to teach. Everybody he needed to teach was an enemy of what he had to teach, because they were acting in ignorance. But he himself was a perpetuator of that ignorance. So at the same time that he learns is the same time he teaches. No, at the same time he's aware of what needs to be learned is at the same time that he teaches. But when he really learns, he ascends and experiences the highest vision of the highest version of himself that has learned that lesson in another dimension. You can't stay on the same plane, the same frequency when you evolve in your consciousness. The old you have to die. The limited you have to die. The artificial perception of yourself has to dissolve. Once you wake up, the dream you is no longer there. The ghost, the apparition, the phantom self. These phantom selves are not you, but are only opportunities where you can come into the infinite awareness of who you are. Now we tie that in, and I'm going to end this because I've went a very long extent with this. We tie that into the Christ consciousness and Jesus' death being everything that he needed to learn, because he was endowed on the cross, metaphorically speaking. I'm not saying this is a real story, I'm just using it as a metaphor. He died on the cross. He feared death. He said, ᴜირᴄᴇᴜ lama sabachthani, may this cup pass me by. He didn't want to die. But he had to learn what he was teaching, because if he didn't need to learn what he was teaching, then he would never have feared death, and he would willingly lay down on that cross without any pain or agony. Am I lying? So he had to learn it. He was teaching I and the Father are one and all that. That's what he was teaching himself, but teaching humanity at the same time. But once he learned the actual lesson, then he was able to ascend to a higher plane of consciousness. Once he got it, then he was rose from the dead. Because a lot of people think death is where you go after. Death is where you at. When you rise from sleep, you rise from the dead. When you rise from ignorance, you raise from the dead. You're walking around dead now. Talking about you fear death. What you're calling death will be at the moment that you're raised from the dead, because you will be ascending the dead state of consciousness that you was at, where you was in a limited reality. This is the realm of death. That's why everything on this plane is about death and violence and materialism. It's primitive. It's all about selfishness and fear of death and security and self-validation. This is the plane of death. That's why death styles are being promoted as a way of life. And most of the lifestyles out here that's being promoted have nothing to do with life itself or nature or organic. So you're in the realm of the dead right now. You're in an artificial matrix reality where they make that which is artificial seems like life, and got you afraid of what's real as though it's death. But everything that they got for you is dead. All the food is dead, it's deneutralized, everything's dead. It's over sanitized. They've killed everything. All the forests, all the animals, everything's being murdered and killed. This is the realm of death. You're eating dead animals. You're living off the dead. When you wake up, you will rise from that death into the eternal and everlasting life, energy that you really are. You are life energy. You are what life is eternally. But you're living in a false simulated prison, a trap, because you're trying to teach yourself. You're trying to experience the divine presentation of who you are. The so-called death of Jesus of Christ was a divine presentation of consciousness. Life is a divine opportunity. It's an opportunity for the divine presentation of consciousness if you're living in it right, if you're walking in it right. And what we're calling life will be ascending through many different dimensions and having many different paradigm shifts to realize the eternalness of beingness, which is total compassion, total love. We are the love energy, which is constant expansion and awakening and reunion. So what we're calling Christ consciousness is when the artificial you dies and becomes one with the Father consciousness. You come out of the matrix, the matriarch, Ma'at, based on law, the mother, based on nurturing and survival, and you go into the Father consciousness, which is the spirit, which is the eternal selfhood. The eternal selfhood. But you have to fight yourself, which is self-generating the illusion of the artificial self and of death. And you have to fight the matrix to go beyond the distraction, to fight being distracted from the true journey of your soul, to get the parasitic entities of this material plane up off of you, so that you can center yourself and focus on your true eternal spiritual journey, which you got sidetracked by the delusions of this Maya, of this material world of duality, of this artificial self that was created by lower parasitic entities that you think is you, that you're caught up into the narratives and battles and struggles and stories and victim consciousness of that self, to get back on your eternal journey where you're really a dimension hopper. You're really a quantum leaper. You really can travel through many inner and outer dimensions and inner and outer space. I'm just going into it. I'm just starting. But there are certain beings, what God consciousness really is, and I'm going to end it with this, where we travel through all planes. When an avatar or a God incarnates on this planet, they move through all the different planes. And they come to certain planes to awaken you. They come like angels, avatars, gurus, ascended masters. They come to help you get back on your journey to realize what this is really about, what's really going on, where you really are supposed to be headed, so they can exist on all planes and see into all planes. And when the student is ready, the true teacher appears to show them the divine play of divine consciousness, what it really is, where they're really at. So they see it on all different planes and traveling within and out of planes, just to wake you up, so you can see the bigger picture of who you are and what this is all about. The micro matrix parasites are the forces of evil, and the guru is the great force of good. The divine ascended master is the force of great good, for a soul to be remembered, to remember its true journey and to truly awaken. This King Noble Black Supremacy, signing out.